Welcome everyone to this LinkedIn Live. I'm Alex Bailey, the Global CEO of Bailey & French.
And I'm Dr. Dane Poboka, the Director of Learning at Bailey & French.
Hi Dane. Right, today we are going to be talking about human leadership. Why is it so critically important right now? We're also going to cover how human leaders attract the best people into organizations for us. They help reduce time to performance, how they motivate performance, and how they inspire growth on an individual and an organizational basis. So I'm really pleased to say we have a fantastic audience today. Lots of people dialing in from every continent and region right the way across the globe. And also some fantastic senior decision makers who are responsible for creating and delivering and developing people strategies for organizations in all industries and all markets. So welcome today. This is a LinkedIn Live, which means it's not a webinar. We're not going to be showing you loads of information on slides, detailed data and models and theories. And equally, it's also not an audible podcast. This is somewhere in between, a lively conversation and discussion about the topic we're here to discuss today. And it will be available in a recording for you to be able to share afterwards. We're going to send you some more detailed information about human leadership afterwards, so please do connect to us through LinkedIn so that we can make sure that you get that information that you could share. We'd also love to meet up with everybody, so we're going to be talking about human leadership. We'd love to hear more about what that might look like in your organisation, either as an individual or on a team basis. And we'd love to meet up face-to-face or virtually. We work right the way across the world, also virtually and face-to-face, clearly easier in the UK. But I'm also going to be in Houston with Ant towards the end of March. So any of our Houston connections, I'd love to get in touch and have maybe a coffee and a chat in person. There's going to be an informal kind of Q&A session, kind of after party, after about 40-45 minutes. So please do leave some questions and comments in the chat box on the side. I hope everybody has access to that. So whatever comes to mind, we'd love to hear from you and love to make this as interactive as possible. But let's get stuck in, Dane. So today we're here to talk about human leadership and why now? Because this is a really hot topic. But before we get into the kind of why now, and I guess it's probably quite associated with it, but what do we really mean by human leadership? There's a lot of people here who have done leadership development programs, probably many of them created them themselves and delivered them to large populations. So what do we really mean? What does human leadership actually mean as a differentiator?
If we distill it down into one word, we're talking about relationships.
Yeah.
The world has gone through so much change, challenge, disruption, through the pandemic and beyond. And we've also been faced with digital disruption, the advance of technology. People are feeling really disconnected. It's really hard to focus on what's important. Then when you layer on top of that bombardment of information from so many different streams and so many different areas, how do you find the meaning through all of that information? How do you find that guiding principle, the guiding light? Human leadership allows us to find a way to latch onto that signal through the noise. It's talking about understanding our strengths, being our authentic selves. It's talking about how do we understand others and those around us. It focuses on role modeling the behaviors and inclusivity that we strive, and also building connections, building those relationships with those around us.
So yeah, coming down to just relationships, being a catch-all for everything you just talked about. And I often talk to people about human leadership at the moment, and the common kind of misconception that we get straight away isn't that about just empathy and compassion and kindness? And it's so much more than that, though, isn't it? I mean, we can't stop there. Surely that's not necessarily, it's not a big enough differentiator, is it?
It's not. And if we stop there, then I guess we could easily be talking about chatbots and AI, right?
Absolutely.
There's something more to it than that.
Yeah.
And it is because we are talking about that relationships. We're talking about the connections, the meaning, the purpose, the joy that you have, when you're building those relationships and working with those around you, or if we think more broadly, not just in a professional work-life setting, but human leadership in all aspects of our life, our friends, our family, our communities. This is applicable more broadly and more universally than just in the workplace setting.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess, you talked about, the chatbots and AI, and, that's really happening now. Like, that's already everywhere.
Yes.
And it's advanced quite a lot, actually, in the last kind of month, incredibly. And I even think about it now, like, what's it going to be like when, if we were to come into an organization and we open up our laptop in the morning and there's our AI chat box coach or manager actually asking us whether we had a nice dinner last night and did we have a nice time with our friends. And, how can we make sure that we really live the differentiator of being human as a leader? Because I can imagine, that's a very base level in organizations to have something like that. Is it possible that could replace us, just because we can? Should we?
Well, I'm quite happy to let the AI take care of my data modeling. I would much rather talk to somebody about what I did on the weekend rather than my automated chatbot. So yeah, it's got to be something more. And we're not talking about, another sort of abstract theoretical framework or model, with human leadership. We're not looking at something that defines what good looks like and forcing people into a specific behavior or to a specific box. It's really about understanding that most authentic self and connecting with those around us.
Yeah, and I like to think about it as kind of keeping our humans switched on. And I think that's applicable for everybody right now. We are so driven by information that's given to us in formats, and algorithms work out our preferences for us. So we're kind of fed this stream of information that kind of keeps us boxed,
yes,
in our world. And actually what we need is someone who kind of draws us out, who is curious of what we can become and how we can stretch and grow into new areas of ourselves, let alone, just at work.
Yes.
And that's where I see, human leaders being that kind of, exactly as you said, that guiding light, the kind of the pathway to helping us all keep our human switched on. So they need to keep the human switched on as well, but actually keeping the human switched on everywhere, because ultimately as customers, we expect that, don't we? When I am in contact with anyone I'm buying a product or a service from, I want the human experience from that, and I love the human experience. So how can we make sure that human leaders are really keeping us that kind of human switched on? I think is, for me, how I like to think about human leadership and the differentiators, because we need to make sure that we know about those if these advances are going to be coming at us so quickly.
Absolutely. I really love that statement, human switched on. We might see it on the website tomorrow. I think that's great. And it sounds like it should be the most easiest thing to do, but it's actually really quite difficult.
Yeah, totally. And that's the thing, isn't it? I've spoken to people before and they said, should we be training people in how to be human as a fundamental kind of question? And I think that's a great question, because actually, when we first started talking about this, I guess 2-3 years ago, people kind of saw it, but there was so much going on. It wasn't really kind of hitting almost. But I think now, because of the advances we've seen, because of the changes of ways of working, all of a sudden people are getting it that actually we really do need these life skills of being a human, to be almost reminded and refreshed of what it means to be a human, so that we can maintain our strength in that, yes, and be able to use that to our advantage, as well as work with the technological advances that are going to make our work easier and smarter, so that we can actually kind of, to a certain extent, maintain control. So let's move on, because I could talk about human leadership as a concept for ages. The second point we wanted to really address today was thinking about how human leaders can help us attract the best people. We have seen such a broad pull for recruitment in particular areas over the last few years with the turnover. There's been turmoil in all kinds of industries and markets, and great changes and advances that have helped us do really, really fantastic recruitment processes. But we are still in a very candidate-led market, despite the economic turmoil that's going on across the world. What do human leaders do that helps us attract the best people? Because that's got to be a key outcome, a key measure, really, for a human leader in an organization. We want them to be the ones that that help us do that, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And you said it, it's a candidate-led market. And the perceptions and attitudes towards work, it continues to shift and evolve. And I think we need to adapt and respond to that. The lines between work life and home life is blurring. People's delineation between my work self and my home self, it's just coming together. I mean, you see it on interviews that the newsreaders will have, and streaming from somebody's home, and next minute a dog bursts in through an interview, or someone's child comes in. There's less separation now.
It's happened to us all now, though, hasn't it? So I remember when that first started happening, and it was like, oh, really shocking and fantastic. But actually, we've all experienced it, and I think that's the lovely thing, is that you can almost, everyone can remember when did that thing first kind of break the kind of the idea or the perception and the vision into your life, and allow everyone else into your home. Yes, absolutely. It kind of went from that was a meme and that was a viral social media event to it must be a Thursday, because it has just become so common now. But so that's really important, because people are looking for something more from work, and I think our recruitment and our attraction processes need to evolve to give space for that. To move beyond, I guess, those more traditional approaches to screening, to hiring. Well, it's an area you know a lot about, so I know that, Dane, this is an area that I can really delve into a bit deeper with you, because certainly from some of the people I've spoken to about recruitment processes, and people we help too, quite often clients will say, there's something wrong with the recruitment process. We haven't got the right people coming through. And when you dig down a bit deeper, sometimes it's actually different parts of the employee life cycle that have actually failed. And yet the result is, right, we must tighten up that recruitment process and make sure we get the right people through. Yes. And so it's almost like it's kind of reverse pushing more process in, isn't it? Absolutely. It's like tighten up the process or add more stages to the process. Yes. And so, we're looking beyond things like structured interviews, which are really quite constraining at times, because they're just focusing on very specific things. We're talking about more than just standardized psychometrics or simulated behavioral exercises. It's coming back to that human connection, having that connection and relationship with the line manager or the hiring manager. That's so important. I've been on both sides of that recruitment process, and the thing that I've always felt that difference is when that connection's made. Yeah. And you feel it. When that has happened. Straight away. Yeah. And there's so much research out there about how long it takes to make those first impressions. And yet we try and train managers to not go with their gut instincts. So it's kind of like, don't have a bias, but don't forget to listen to your voice. I mean, like, what should we be doing? Yeah, exactly. And it's a balance. I'm not advocating throwing out certain things necessarily. It's about finding that balance, but making sure that you give enough space so that you can have that real authentic connection with that other person. And that will allow you to start to understand, what is the unique experience that this person is bringing to a role? Yeah. What are their strengths, and how may that supplement what we have and see that person thrive? And that really creates the candidate experience, doesn't it? Because, let's be honest, we're living in kind of a world of fear. There's been quite some pivot moments where things have really changed how people feel about work. And about life. There's big stuff going on, and so really, we need that candidate experience to be one that feels warm, that feels like, oh, hang on, I feel safe here. I feel like I could. That person will help me, will protect me, will support me, will help stretch me as well, but in the right way, and feel positive. Yes. It needs to feel positive, doesn't it? And that's so fundamental to that candidate experience. Absolutely. And from the recruitment side of things, absolutely skills and experience are really important. You see these as almost like the ticket to the dance, right? That's what brings you into the dance floor. It is the
the strengths and the human leadership aspect that gives you that opportunity to see a bit beyond that, the real person that has the opportunity to join the organisation.
Okay, so let's push that a bit further then, from the attraction and kind of assessment part of the employee life cycle. How do human leaders help to reduce time to performance? Now, time to performance for me is like a really big measure. I think it's a great indicator of how good your organisation is set up in terms of process, but also other aspects too. Because from lots of different organisations that I've worked with, it's not uncommon for people to have a really great structured induction and onboarding process, and yet to still imagine that people won't really be up to speed for 3 to 6 months. But 3 to 6 months, I mean, for goodness sake, really? Can we all afford to have people in all different types of roles? This isn't even in kind of complex roles, this is fairly simple roles. Maybe, like, if it takes that long for someone to get up to speed and really be able to perform, maybe they're in the wrong job.
Well, yes, or maybe there's just a lot of e-learning training sessions that they have to go through that's dragging that out. And again, these things are important. We need to make sure health and safety and processes and the like are attended to. But yeah, I think from the perspective of onboarding and induction, the human leadership sort of element to that comes around to role modelling. It comes down to how you build the connections in the workplace, and how do you understand the culture? How do you feel safe? And then you can start to feel more of that recognition, that value, that trust, and you can start to see how your strengths play into that role. And that is going to be unique and authentic to every single person. This is not a standardized process that everybody will come out looking the same way, because not everybody is the same. So that induction process has to do it in a way that is inclusive and builds that, I guess, celebrates the diversity, but allows people to really focus in on building those relationships and those connections.
And really makes it important, right? And I think that's it. Even while you're talking, I'm sitting there thinking, even with people moving roles a lot quicker now. Some people saying that, lots of people are moving roles in every 18 months. And if they're not getting a growth opportunity in work, they'll look for something else within 18 months. That makes that induction and onboarding part, that time to performance, even more critical, doesn't it? More pressurized, because certainly in large organizations, when you're recruiting en masse, that is going to cost the organization so much money. And in this competitive environment where everything is so uncertain, we've got to be looking at tightening up that process. And if that means actually loosening some of the process, there's a really interesting kind of concept shift there, isn't there, that we could be working with. So now I'm going to move on, because we've got quite a bit to get through. But I think that's a really interesting piece. And I don't think it's focused on enough in organizations, particularly when we're recruiting the way things have been in the past. I think we need to really focus in on how human leaders can do that in a different way, not necessarily more process driven, as you said. So
and I think just one point on that is it's probably seen as quite a structured process as well. Everybody gets the same thing and ticks the same boxes. It's quite dehumanized in that sense. So it is about bringing in flipping that pendulum back the other way a little bit more, to allow that individual to shine and to be seen as shining.
Absolutely. So performance motivation. We talk about this a lot in terms of a contrast from performance management to performance motivation. But let's focus in on human leaders. So what is it that human leaders do that really motivates performance rather than just simply manages it?
When we talk about human leaders in the context of performance, motivating performance, we're talking about a holistic perspective here. We're not talking about managing against KPIs and business metrics, which are really super important, because that's the pulse check of how the business is running. But this is something about creating a space where people can perform. This is about creating a space for well-being. and creating a nurturing environment where their team can thrive and flourish. So we're looking at employee engagement being higher because you're able to motivate this performance. They feel confident and comfortable. They're maintaining energy through this process, feeling respected. Again, it's just so important, that value and that trust. And so looking at motivating performance, the human leader is able to create that space. And it's not just about trying to get people to perform or trying to get the best from people, but it's about trying to motivate them to want to give their best, to be empowered and inspired to give that best. And that's a really difficult thing, to do when sometimes you're approaching performance management from a very traditional perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no script for it, is there? And I think that's it. It's that kind of human leaders are much more confident to be able to lead with a lot more intuition, actually. I think it's coming to light that there's a bit of a theme here around intuition, as being confident. So it's not just having the skills, the skills and the equipment, like the processes and all the different parts that play into the mechanics of that, but the intuition and the confidence to know when to bring that in and to balance that well-being as well with performance. Through the pandemic, right the way across the world, managers and leaders moved into a space where they focused in on really looking after their people, because there was just this sense we all had to look after each other and everyone was going through it together. There was never such a sense of kind of we're in this together, I think. And, now most places coming out of that, obviously there are still some who are really, really still struggling with it, but moving into a post-pandemic era, leaders need to be able to move on from the well-being focus that people have become used to and be able to talk about performance in the same conversation. And I think certainly prior to the pandemic, there was still swathes of organizations still really just focusing on well-being being, extra benefits, benefits of healthcare or benefits of physical opportunities to go to the gym or healthy snacks and things like that. And whilst we know that those aspects of well-being are really important, we know also the biggest impact was how our managers and leaders treat us in work, whether that be at home or in the office environment or elsewhere in a production environment or in a service environment. And we need to be able to help leaders, don't we? Be able to make that transition to bring in the performance conversation without fear, that actually we are here to drive business outcomes. As you said, like the KPIs, the results, they're really important. We can't miss those. So let's actually make sure that we bring those conversations with a balance. And exactly as you said, human leaders are good at balance and being able to role model those pieces. And I love that focus.
They create that space, for that, there's that psychological safety there. And so that allows you to challenge people, in a positive and constructive way, but also know that, when that's happening, I'm not being attacked. This is to help us shift the needle, to go forward or to address something that's not working, and that there's a safety element in that. And we all know about the numerous surveys and statistics and metrics that talk about the reasons why people leave jobs, and it's often not that job itself, it's the manager, it's that relation, it's that connection. So focusing on that human leadership element brings it much more closer, and builds a stronger bond between individuals and the team themselves, because it's not just a one-to-one basis, it's a team as well that we're talking about here, that trust and safety within a team.
And the connecting of others. And that leads us on brilliantly, actually, to talking about the last kind of focus that we sharing, which is around inspiring individual and business growth. Because you've started to talk about it there in terms of being able to positively challenge and help create a safe environment where people can be brave and stretch and feel comfortable moving out of their comfort zone, but feeling like they're achieving some growth. We're living organisms as human beings. We have a tendency towards growth. And so how do human leaders help unlock that and inspire that individual growth and take that into business growth? We need business growth. We can't just focus everything at work on the individual. It has to be about teams, departments, groups, projects, and lots of organizations have a mix of all of that going on all the time in lots of different kind of matrix environments. So how do human leaders like move on from simply just motivating performance to really inspiring individual growth that leads to people wanting to grow together?
Yes, yeah, that individual growth. I think the key element here for me is human leadership. The perspective comes from positive psychology.
Yeah.
You know, and that's focusing on our unique strengths, you know, our authenticity, role modeling, you know, that human connection, as we've spoken about, the inclusive behaviors, you know, that's really, really key because that is so intrinsically entwined with growth. But the next sort of component to that for me is creating that space for reflection. I think that's really important. And coming back to what we were saying earlier in the session about lots of information coming from multiple channels and being bombarded and the pace of life and work, creating a space and highlighting the importance of that reflection can't be underestimated. Focusing on, you know, what is my purpose, focusing on time to be grounded, reflecting on what is it that energizes me, what is it that I'm good at, and the things that I love to do. You know, it's really that true positive psychology perspective. And I think if you ask most people, tell me, you know, what are your top 5 strengths, or the top 5 things that you're really, really good at? I have to guess that most people would struggle to come with more than 3.
They do. I've asked lots of people. Lots of people here know I focus about strengths all the time. And yet people really struggle to talk about what they're good at. But if you ask them for a list of what they're rubbish at, they can come out with that straight away.
They double it. Right?
It's amazing.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
So that positive focus and that positive perspective is really, really important. And I think then as you evolve that to think about the business, from that business angle as well, what you start to do is you create that space, that safe space for people to test, try and fail fast, learn from mistakes, you know, take the learning from that experience, but drive that forward for creativity and for innovation and for further growth. You know, you kind of normalize that. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're human, right? We're not the AI chatbots, so we will make mistakes, we will muck things up, but that's okay. And so, you know, if we're going to grow as individuals, as teams, as businesses, we can't let the fear of failure stop us from doing that. And by creating that safe space where that's okay and there's still a learning from it, you know, it's a really important aspect.
So much in there. I'm just trying to unpack that a bit. I'm reflecting myself actually on reflection. Some of the exec and kind of senior leadership teams that I've worked with have been focusing so much on the horizon and what's next. And the only opportunity they do to actually do focus on reflection is in their reviews. So review of the quarter or review of the half or the year, but it's all with a focus on what's next. And it's often not on a reflection of learning in terms of actually valuing and knitting together in hindsight, you know, actually what really happened. And I think that's really fundamental here because you can grow so much from reflection, but particularly the difference when you reflect back on when we put a strategy in place, right, for whether a people strategy or a process strategy, whatever it is we're focusing on, we can't take account of the amount of things and challenges and changes that are going to affect that strategy into the future, especially not in this world right now. So actually what I find the biggest value of looking back on kind of strategic results is we did all of this, and what else was going on throughout that entire time? How did we achieve those results with everything else that was happening with us, to us, around us? And when you do that, you can actually reflect on so much more growth than just simply the results and the outcomes that it came to bear, because you see the challenges that people operated within and alongside, and the kind of complexity of things that were layered on us, and yet still achieving those results. It can be really insightful and really, I think, quite shocking and quite pleasantly shocking of what we're able to do, particularly as a team. it's quite a bonding experience for kind of leadership teams and senior leaders to think, actually, we did all of that in spite of, the reality of what was going on around us. And I think that value of reflection is kind of critical in terms of individual growth and business growth, because it shows what we can get through. But also in terms of human leadership, one of the key things we talk about a lot in our programs is about human leaders not just being good at connecting with other people, like relationships themselves, but in connecting others and being able to, as you said, identify, the strengths and the makeup of a team and know who's going to collaborate well together and know how to bring diverse thinking into the right projects to get the fantastic results that are really possible with fantastic levels of diversity.
Yes.
That is ever increasing in organizations now, thankfully. So that ability to kind of connect others, for me, is really what drives a lot of business growth, because strategies don't really come about in terms of really achieving results unless people are working together.
Yes.
Because people working in silos aren't actually working for the organization, they're working at that kind of personal end goal. But being able to inspire others to work together for the business growth is the ultimate outcome that strategies are designed for, right? So, for me, that's so fundamental for business growth, is thinking about how human leaders really make that connection, bring together people, teams, departments, projects, and make that connectivity, share the learning so that people are storytelling and gathering that peer learning together, because you learn so much more from someone who goes through the same challenges that you do, don't you?
Absolutely. And, I think it's really quite interesting when you take that perspective of connecting across teams, functions, departments, and then you layer that into the technology advances. So, we're not even talking about a local level, you're talking about a global level, you're talking about remote teams, virtual working, and that's really, really challenging, and so it's about how do you create that sense of belonging, even when you're not necessarily sat in the same place or even in the same country as people that are in the team that you're working with. The opportunities for diversity is just amazing. But it takes a special focus to be able to harness that really, really effectively, and that belonging and storytelling, connections, relationships. This is critical and key to that whole process.
And it's no surprise that this is all a hot topic, is it? Because actually we've used a ton of buzzwords here today, haven't we? Well-being, inclusion, diversity, belonging, being able to have our differentiators from this, increasing digital transformation that's affecting all of us in every market and industry. So we've talked really about what human leadership is. We've talked about what is the differentiator in terms of keeping that human switched on as an individual, but as a leader, helping others keep their humans switched on, for us, for our organizations, for our clients and customers, and to meet those expectations of those clients and customers too. We've talked about how human leaders really attract the best people for organizations by creating that candidate experience that people want to be part of that organization, and they're willing to really give of themselves to become, through that process, someone that wants to join and be welcomed into the fold that they feel is being created. And then moving into the further into the employee life cycle, we've talked about reducing time to performance so people can get up to speed quickly, so that they feel like they're adding value and that their contribution is respected and needed, and they are a core part of the team as quickly as possible, because people are moving through roles quicker. And we need to be able to help people feel like they can jump straight into their role and be fantastic. And human leaders do that by really noticing individual differences, uniqueness, helping them slot in the right place, finding ways of collaborating with others who have complementary strengths, and really creating that positive environment where people can feel safe, as you said, that psychological safety, to feel comfortable that they can try new things, they can fail, and still be brave and develop the confidence that they absolutely can, with the skill set and the knowledge that we've brought into the organization with them. And then we moved on to talk about motivating performance and why human leaders motivate it more so than just managing it. So they absolutely keep hold of all the mechanics that are there to keep the structure alive in most organizations that need that. Leaders are the arms into our organization. They're the ones that translate and bring the strategy to life all the way through the organization and keep that pulse and culture in the right space. But taking that next step to motivating performance, again, by focusing in on strengths, giving people the space and the time to grow and stretch is really critical. And then we've talked about individual and business growth and how human leaders really help, again, create time and space for reflection so people can see how they're growing, how they connect people together in a way that connects the organization to deliver business growth. There's not a lot of bad stuff about human leadership, is there really?
It sounds quite good and very complex as well. It's just like, this is not just a soft and fluffy thing, right? This is not just, we just need to be nice to each other. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of facets to it, and it applies to so many different areas of that employee life cycle. There's so much potential there to be unlocked by it.
100%. So we're going to come to some questions in a moment. So if you've got any thoughts or questions, please tap away and get those into the chat, and we'll do our very best to answer those. And so just to recap, the areas that we've covered, this recording will be made available afterwards, but we'd like to send some information directly to you in a format that you can share. So people are normally used to, in webinars, seeing slides with more in-depth information on them. So we can get those out to you, so please do connect to us if you're not already, so that we can send those on. We'd also love to meet up and discuss individual and team challenges and how human leadership can support those. We are available in lots of different ways, virtually and in person. And for those people who are calling into this from Houston, I'm going to be in Houston in a couple of weeks' time. Love to come and see you and have a coffee and a chat. But we've also got people right the way across the world. There's 30 of us based here in the global headquarters here in Brighton. In the UK, we've got 130 facilitators right the way across the world in all regions of the world and delivering our fantastic programs in lots of different ways, reaching 154 countries last year, which is really shows, I guess, the universality of these types of topics, because this is all markets, all industries, public and private sector. This stuff is about being it's completely human level stuff. And the way that it's tailored then is through the facilitation into context or leadership level, etc. But we have some free trials of our solutions for any organizations that would like to take us up on those. So again, get in touch directly if this has sparked some fantastic ideas around the challenges that you're facing in your organizations. But also some call to actions as well. So afterwards, please do share the recording of this LinkedIn Live with your network. We would love to see that go quite broadly. We have a QR code as well, shortly to come up, takes us to our website. It's got a resource hub on it with loads of free stuff on there that you might help and find helpful and useful in applying in your own situations in your organization. Do follow Bailey & French Learning and Recruitment on our LinkedIn pages. Again, there's links there to our newsletter, loads of free events, and also lots of insights. We like to share quite freely the concepts and the new areas that we're working in, and really proud to say that I believe we're one of the first organizations to have a fully ready to go human leadership development program that is fully scalable right the way across the world to large global organizations. So we'd love to talk about it with anyone who wants to hear more about that and some of the pilot data that we have coming through. So we're going to go now to some questions. I am looking at your tablet, which I think you can see some of those there, and I'm looking up on the screen.
Yes.
What questions have we got? Any good ones?
So there's a question that came through a bit earlier. It's actually about just understanding more about the focus of human leadership for us. Is it individual, or how does that scale across an organization?
Well, for me, human leadership is quite a big concept. And as I said, because it's so kind of universally kind of applicable to all human beings, it's not really just for those people who are leading a team. It is applicable for people leading a team, absolutely. That's where the kind of priority focus is. But actually, lots of people are in roles where they are aspiring into leadership roles. And the better they are at some of these skills already, the easier they are going to find the transition into leading a small team that grows into a big team, into a department, into a function. So actually, this is relevant to anybody. And in terms of scaling that, then actually, as I said, the leaders reach into the arms of the organization, and we often roll out programs through our leadership populations, and sometimes a top-down effort or sometimes a bottom-up effort if you're in a traditional hierarchical organization. But actually, you can go any which way. You can light fires all over an organization and connect them with some of this content. But I find the best way is really going where the energy is. Let's look at the demand. When you talk about a concept and a hot topic like human leadership, we've seen the traction that we've had with this, even just in the last few weeks, releasing it into populations. People are interested, they're intrigued, they want to understand because it's affecting us all, this impact of the digital transformation. We all want to know, like, what is our differentiator? How are we going to make sure that the robots don't take over? Like, we need to make sure we know who we are as humans and that we do that in the best way. And people love learning. So, generally, there's lots and lots of different ways that we can work. But obviously, our program is designed to have kind of knowledge aspects around data and research, which people love now, in this world of having verified information and watching out for kind of fake news elements, then actually people turn much more to scientific data. And I love the fact that the Human Leadership Program is based on evidence-based research, which has all come from large data sets that are really valid and reliable across the world. So again, you're really bringing in that inclusivity and the diversity of thinking into the research that is at the core of the program.
Yes. And I think talking about the core of the program, is this something that takes a lot of time to understand? Is this a large investment of time to be able to get to the key elements that we're talking about here, or how adaptable is that?
I think that it's a life's work. I have to say that because I think leadership is a life's work. You're never there. One of the things that drives a lot of our design is this base in emotional intelligence. It's one of like such a foundational core to so many leadership programs, and we use that in the design of our programs, and I know others do too. But being able to know that actually emotional intelligence actually increases with age anyway in our life is really demonstrates that anything we can do to kind of accelerate that is going to help us be more effective in performing our role as leaders. So I think it's applicable to anybody to be able to apply it in their own way. And I think people need to come to that in terms of what's important to them. So, I think you can go through things quickly and anyone can do that and shortcut things. But actually, if you're learning and you're applying and embedding it into what you do on a daily basis and you really believe in what you're doing, then, as I said, you can make it into your life's work. But, there's learning opportunities in lots of different ways. And obviously, we've got easy stuff to roll out. But it really depends how populations take that. I think most people expect, a full range of learning options now. I don't want to talk about learning styles here, but I mean, in terms of, on-demand stuff, facilitated, challenging stuff, embedding reflection work, tools that you can go and sit on a bench and have a look at that don't have to be, on the screen. But also things where, you can share with peers and learn socially, or learn in the background whilst you're making dinner.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I really like about this perspective is the philosophy and the foundation of how this works. It's about bringing that person into conversation and having them articulate their perspective and them describing themselves. And so, yes, I'm a psychologist by background, and I've spent a long time using psychometrics and a lot of assessments that tell people who they are or what they are. This is a very different approach because it's about, building that platform where people realize this and describe it for themselves. And I think that is the most important thing to have sustained prolonged sort of benefits and change from this, because they connect with it very, very easily.
Yeah, and it's something I'm really passionate about. Actually, I've talked to many times about almost like the lost art of human connection and meaningful connection. The digitization that's going on in the world. And I see it every day with my 2 teenage daughters. You know, they're growing up with a mobile like this in their face. And, you know, I think, well, I never had that. And we were forced into different ways of communicating. But now people are choosing not to use dialogue and not to get into conversation or any kind of debate, and actually kind of taking a lot of information as it's given to them. And that really worries me.
Yeah.
So, you know, applying a human leadership learning approach in a new age kind of digital format, it's fine to make sure that you've got, you know, a variety of learning options so that you don't kind of get bored with one stream, but it's got to center in on dialogue and being human and actually using the human articulation and ability to connect with others. Yes. To learn as a basis of learning. And I think that's got to be fundamental in any program. How can you possibly have a human leadership program that you don't take a human approach to? So I feel quite strongly about that. Do we have any other good questions coming through?
I think if we step on from that, actually, Hannah has sent through a really great question. So she asks, are there any common barriers that leaders should be aware of and keep in mind when implementing human leadership? Thank you, Hannah, for your question.
When implementing human leadership, what barriers? Yeah, you know, I would say fear is a big one. You know, when I kind of first started talking to groups about human leadership, this immediate question of, I'm not sure I should be trying to be trained in human leadership. It's quite a big fear. You know, surely I'm just naturally human, and certainly that. I find that really, really interesting, and not necessarily a barrier, but an initial kind of like people kind of put their fear up in the way. But actually, I think when people come to understand that this is the good and positive about being a human, and really, it's not necessarily training people in being human. It's just about bringing back to the forefront of our attention what is most important, and that I think overcomes many barriers. But I do think people are much more open now to the topic of human leadership than they were a year, 2 years ago. I really think something has completely flipped in the last year, and this is definitely a topic and a title that is getting a lot of attention. You look at, you know, bestsellers out now. There's human everything, human experience, human this, human that. You know, and it's really, really becoming vitally important that actually people are aware of what they can do. To ensure they know, you know, what it is that's good and true about us as human beings.
Yes.
And also the universality and how that connects us to every other human being on the planet, and that we're all not alone. Actually, we're all one, and there's a huge amount of kind of unification and connection in that, as well as the beautiful diversity and uniqueness that exists in every single human being on the planet. And I love talking about that too. So. Barriers. I'm trying to think more about barriers.
I think one of the things for me, it's about how do you make these accessible and practical for people. So the concept, as you mentioned, you know, there could be fear around this, because what does this actually mean? You know, finding a way to bring even just small concepts of what we mean by human leadership to life, and making that human experience, that connection, says a lot more than the words, you know, because you feel it. And as we spoke about with selection and, you know, the connection with a manager through an interview process, and you know when you've got that connection, you know when you're making this practical and you have people and teams experiencing it, it's that aha moment, it's the light bulb. It's like, okay, I get it because I can feel it.
Feel it, yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So we have another question that's come through. What are the key outcomes you're most proud of seeing emerge from your work in human leadership? And that's from Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.
What are the key outcomes
that you're most proud of seeing emerge from your work in human leadership?
Oh, that's a great question. I am most proud of seeing the variety of conversations happening in like the social conversations around the online course of human leadership that we have available. As I mentioned, 154 countries, represented in the thousands of learners that are going through or have been through that program. But when you look at the chat function and the social kind of conversation that's going on throughout, I think 3 or 4 years ago, people didn't used to use discussion forums so much. There was a lot more observation going on, and there were a couple of brave people having conversations and saying what they thought, and everyone else would look on. And now I think the pandemic has just, as I said, forced us into not necessarily keyboard warriors, but being able to use, our digital selves in ways that we perhaps weren't so confident to do previously. And seeing people have those conversations and have those conversations in lots of different languages, that was so beautiful. Just to see, the fact that people were connecting from right the way across the world in languages that were connecting lots of different people in different countries. And I was like, wow, that is so super powerful. So yeah, super proud that we've created or found almost like this golden thread of something very special that actually is universally applicable to so many types of people, everyone. And yet also completely unique, and people can find something special in that. I think that is rare.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the part that I'm, the aspect that I feel most proud about as well, and obviously you've been in this space for much longer than what I have, but is hearing the stories of hearing people take their learning and their insights from going through these courses, but seeing how they use that to support themselves through really challenging life situations. We work with lots of different clients and people and populations in all sort of sectors and industries. And some of them can face really personally challenging scenarios and situations, and seeing how they can translate this to support themselves in situations like that means, this is not, again, just something you leave at the workstation when you clock off at the end of the day. It's like you can take this with you, and it helps you in many areas of life.
Yeah, and we get that feedback all the time.
Absolutely. Now, I know that we have about 5 or 10 minutes left, and we have a few more questions that have come through. There's a question here from Anthony. Do people actually want human leaders? It's quite provocative. That's an interesting...
isn't that a great question? I think that comes back to what we were saying before. Like, I would be quite intrigued to have like a chatbot asking me how my dinner was last night, because when I look at the research that people can actually feel empathy for robots if they're feeling sad, that blows my mind. I'm like, okay, wow, we can have empathy with something we know isn't alive or sentient. And so what does that mean, like, for how I would engage with something like that? And would I like it? Would it be quite nice to have something completely anonymous that really replays back to me kind of basically everything I've ever said? So, but I think for me, it comes back to almost like the novelty then wears off. In the same way that when you see, this kind of explosion of some of the social media platforms, really taking short learning or shorts kind of videos for people and capturing people's attention in 30 seconds, in a minute, in 2 minutes maximum. And then that being translated straight into the learning industry, that people just want a snapshot now, but they want lots of snapshots all the time. They just want immediate snapshots. I think it's really interesting that for a while was a novelty, but then it became too much because everyone does it with everything. That actually now people are looking for the long form.
Yes.
And people are looking, and people are talking about making like 8-hour-long movies. And I'm thinking this is really interesting because yes, we are attracted to the novelty, we're attracted to the ideas, we like early adoption of new stuff. I love it. But I do, novelty wears off for me quite quickly, and I will either just get fed up and I think kind of frustrated that I'm not getting my needs met of my human brain. Yeah. And I think, I think, do people want human leaders? I think, I think they expect them, if I'm honest. I mean, if I talk to my girls, they're 12 and 13, about what they expect of the future workforce, they talk about things, and I think, oh goodness me, we better get human leadership sorted because that's what they're expecting,
Just sort it out for them by the time they get
I've only got a few more years left. Seriously, we've got some urgency here.
Yeah, human switched on, I think. And I think actually that's probably about as much time we have.
It's as
for
much time.
questions.
Yeah, we need to wrap it up now. But leaving the comments open, I believe, through LinkedIn Live, so we can continue to network and chat together as a group for the people who are using this as a recording, and for the people that have joined us live. I hope you can tell it's live with all the trip ups.
And the ambulance in the background at one point.
It's been an absolute blast. I've really enjoyed this. I love doing this kind of stuff now. I think that comes across. I think people know it. But I really hope that everyone watching and listening has enjoyed being here with us today. Just to recap, we'll be sending more informative data and information out to everybody afterwards individually. So please make sure you're connected with me on LinkedIn, because I'll send it through the messaging portal there. And please do share the recording of this more broadly, and we'd love to connect with you. So reach out and let us know when you're free, where you're free, and we'll make sure that happens. The team are all super excited to expand our reach. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Dane. I love talking to you anyway, but about this, like my favourite topic. What a great evening for us here in the UK.
An absolute pleasure.
And for those people who are still at work, I hope you have the rest of a lovely day, whether it be your afternoon coming or it's waking up in the morning and you've got the day ahead of you. Thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. And we'll be checking in for one of our next LinkedIn Lives.